Hi, welcome to the Twilight Imperium for strategy sessions. This is session 301, looking at the Prophecy of Kings expansion and its impacts on strategy in the game. My name is Patience, it's a virtue, and we did 4 other sessions previously. A 101 session, which was a roundtable introduction to Twilight Imperium for strategy. Then we did a 201, 202, and 203 sessions, which were one-on-one conversations with Mantis, Seven, and Olo. For this 301 session, the same participants will be coming back from the 101 session. That's Stads, who helped cook up the idea for these strategy sessions. The Defterist, now known as the Deaf Piper, Duke Lukum, and Mantis will be filling in for Visioness this time. So what this is we're looking at the impacts of the expansion on the highest level of strategy and the strategic shifts that we're considering. Many of them, we start off looking at the fact that the game now usually ends in round 5 and all the implications that has for scoring, point denial, win slaying, support for the thrones. Also tech paths and factions we look at more generally, and we just step back and look at the enriched economy in POK, the need for more influence, the paramount question of mobility, which of course is ongoing, and how the game has changed in that regard. So it's a really action-packed, lots of interesting topics that we discuss. So before we get rolling, we want to thank Flat Tomatoes, who's recording and producing all of these sessions, which are available on his YouTube channel, Flat Tomatoes YouTube channel, where you will also find various recorded tournament games of Twilight Imperium. We want to thank Milty, who created the images for these sessions. And is also, really instrumental in creating the POK expansion. He worked closely with Dane, who of course is the lead developer, and all the playtesters we need to thank as well. We want to thank Phil, who leads the TI4 Discord community, where we all gather and find games and hang out and chat strategy. Raptor, Daryl, and everybody who worked on the TTS mod for Prophecy Kings, and of course the base game before that. We want to thank Turiyavar, who is the Reddit Twilight Imperium community coordinator, and of course Matt and Hunter from Space Cats Peace Turtles, who've produced so much content and are really the inspiration for these sessions, and I'm sure many other content creators. So thanks so much, Matt and Hunter. All right, we hope everybody enjoys this. Of course, thank you for listening, and we look forward to your feedback. Hey, and this is Patience, and I'm here with an amazing group of fellow TI players who've been loving Prophecy of Kings, and we're going to chat about it. So let's introduce ourselves, starting with Luke.
Hey, I'm Luke, also known as Duke Lukum in the community. I won the SCPT tournament last year, and I guess that gives me authority to sound like I know what I'm talking about. My favorite thing about POK is Gonsekus. He's the Sardak commander, but we'll get to that, I'm sure.
No, I played in a game the other day, Luke, with somebody who took on Gonsekus and just stopped building ships and just completely and got integrated economy and just went crazy. It was crazy. Okay, Mantis.
I'm Mantis. I've never won a Space Cast tournament, so I don't know why you invited me.
Because I'm going to out you because you're a Prophecy of Kings playtester. That's why.
I guess my favorite thing about Prophecy of Kings is selling relic insurance.
All right, you have to explain that.
Oh, some relics people really hate, so I tell them that they can buy my insurance, and if they draw that relic randomly, I'll pay them more money back. And if they don't, I keep their money. Okay. I've gotten like one taker, so it's not really a thing I love.
Stads.
Hey, you may remember me from Twilight Imperium Strategy 101. Since then, I actually won a tournament game. Not anything as prestigious as an SCPT tournament, but time's ticking on that one. My favorite thing about POK is the new objectives. Boring, but they are so good.
Yeah. And the Deaf Piper.
Hey everyone. So I am formerly known as the Defterist. Same person, different coating. I think my moniker is still alive for being the best TI player, even though that's a false statement and nobody should ever take it seriously.
Is that your favorite thing about POK?
My favorite thing of POK is that you play a race that gets paid to fight people. I think that's very on brand. And specifically, Mahawked is one of those that I love a lot because their flavor text is Neil.
Cool. I think my favorite thing is just Ada and Destroyer 2s. It's just that simple. So we were going to kick it off with a question that'll dig us in different directions, and then we're going to have a pretty loose conversation where we're going to cover the major strategic shifts and maybe towards the end some more faction specific discussion. But the question we want to start off with is Prophecy of Kings makes the game shorter, i.e. faster, maybe not time-wise, but in terms of rounds. And like, what does this mean strategically? Why is it the case? So I'm just going to throw that at whoever wants to run with it, go for it, and we'll just go from there.
Yeah, I'll just jump on this and kind of add more definition to the question by what we mean. So if you've listened to 101, we talk a lot about how games ended in round 6. And what we've found, I think, collectively in POK is that games are ending in round 5, like a lot of the time. And so that means that you're going to have less status phases to score. So you need to score your 10 points quicker.
Yeah, how do we know this is the case? We talked about this, briefly. What's our evidence?
Well, anecdotally, I for one specifically know that in my past 20 or so games of POK, I had a single game go longer than 5 rounds, and that one ended in 6th round action phase from 9 to 10 with another secret. So I think it's just the experience of a lot of people that the games literally end every time.
And if we're going into why, I think there's 3 components to that. One is factions are much richer due to exploration and leaders, and this means they can score round 1. The second point is relics. There are free relics that can score you a victory point, and that extra victory point can be all you need. Third is with everyone coming online faster, you also tend to see maybe 1 or 2 more Mechatol points in the game on average, and that accelerates it. Remember, you only need 1 person to get to 10. It's not that everyone's necessarily scoring faster, but the person who's sprinting is sprinting just a little bit faster than they were before.
Yeah, and I think there's actually like a subtle 4th point as well, is that with new objectives, I don't think it's too insane to say, especially with secrets, the average difficulty level of the secret objectives has gone down. Like, I find myself a lot more scoring all 3 secrets every game rather than in base game, where sometimes you could like score 2 secrets and then score like a 2-pointer. Now I find myself scoring like 3 secrets a lot more.
I think a big part of that is in base game there's only 20, right? So 18 of them are in play once everyone has 3. There's always going to be like 4 or 5 that just the board doesn't favor at all. So you don't have that issue anymore because now there's 22 left over in the pile.
You can always go digging for better ones.
Yeah, exactly. And between like the frontier tokens that give you secret objectives, the the fact that there's a couple factions anyway that get to follow secondaries, like there's just more ways to draw them as well, so you can cycle through them and try to get the ones you want basically, or ones that are more user friendly.
Also, Imperial gets taken a lot more often because people are just so rich they get to score twice more often.
I actually haven't seen that happen. When I first started playing PUK, I expected Imperial Round 2 to happen a lot more, but it hasn't in my games, and I don't know if that's anecdotal bias or if that's still the case, because getting your economy online in round 2 is still more important.
What's people's take on that Imperial in round 2 as part of this speed factor, the 5-round factor?
I think a lot of people take it if they had a slow round 1 and they're not in a clear danger of taking the lead. I think with all the heroes online, there's a lot more ways to punish somebody who goes too far ahead too quickly. So maybe people are afraid of that as part of it.
Yeah, I was trying to think, like, as usual, it seems really objective, like stage 1 objective dependent. And I was thinking that one of the main, because I've definitely had a few games that have gone 6 rounds still. And I'm thinking the main factors have been tech objectives, maybe early tech objectives. Can that be right? Because that's harder to do quick.
Sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good point to bring up. Is there are a couple of objectives, the tech ones and the construction ones, that are very hard to like break the pace of still. Like if the full structure objective comes up and you have one structure on the board, you can't score it. Simple as like the next round, right?
Unless you're Relics
and-
or
okay.
Mantis.
Sure,
Or
but
Winnow.
most of the time it's just you can't. And a similar thing with tech. There's a few action cards that break the tech economy, and like Enigmatic Device, I guess, is a frontier exploration that does the same thing. But for the most part, there's still a linear like rate at which you can get techs and structures. But then
Yeah,
No, go ahead, Mantis.
I was going to add that. Yeah, a lot of the new stage ones are scoreable in round one, right? So things like occupy 3 systems on the edge of the board, that's can be costly for some factions, but it's certainly doable by almost any faction, given the right scenarios, right? So there's ones that you can score in round one, so maybe you don't need an Imperial round 2 to catch up because you scored in round 1.
Yeah, that's I think what I was finding too. Like the flip side of hard objectives is 3 on the edge, in particular, easier to score round 1, meaning that maybe I'm less likely to want Imperial because then I need to score the second and third stage 1, right? And how often can I do all of that in round 2?
On the flip side of that, if 3 people scored round 1 and you're among the 3 who didn't, then maybe you really want Imperial now to catch back up to this new pace.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I brought that up earlier, because that's what I see more often, is somebody picking it to catch up rather than somebody picking it to zoom into the lead.
There's nothing
Yeah.
more fun than having 3 heroes used on your home system to take it in one round, and then somebody else to win in the same round. I can attest.
Isn't that-
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that the particularly? That's I think what's one of the factors. This question of Imperial round 2 and the early objectives, scoring objectives in round 1 in particular, and then and getting the 8 to score a couple in round 2. Like this seems to me to be one of the ways in which POK is demanding us to look to the other players right away. What's going on? Who's going to get what card? Can I score this round? Can I get the 8 and score next round because nobody else is going to take it, or is somebody else going to try to do the same thing? I feel like in a lot of ways we're being pushed further from the get-go to pay attention to our neighbors and strategy card selection and whatnot. I don't know if people are experiencing that as well.
I can agree with that, but I feel the biggest driver of that is relics, because exploration, majority of it happens round 1, maybe a bit round 2. Scanlink can make it keep happening, but that's usually not the majority of it. And so these relic fragments come out, and usually you don't have 3 of a kind yourself. You have to trade to make them happen. And I think 4 out of 10 of the relics are strictly economy based per round, so you want to get them as early as possible. So you want to
Let's
trade
list those
them.
stats.
Sorry?
Can we list those?
The 4 that are economy per round. There's the one that gives you an action card or lets you skip a tech prerequisite.
The
I should
profits
have it in front of me.
tiers.
Yeah, profits tiers. There's the scepter of Emilpar.
The Crown of
There's
Ophidia is per round, but it's also a point, so I'm not sure it's in that category.
I'd actually put it in that one because exploring is kind of nice as well. I thought there was
Sure.
one more. Is there not?
I mean, you
I'm
can argue
sitting on
Mob
kind of
Worlds,
one.
Mob Worlds, which
Mob Worlds is
gives you a
kind of one
tech
as
you
well.
want as early as possible. It's not as big of a deal as the other ones, but
Yeah. So I guess I misspoke, but the point is there's many relics you might want early, and there aren't really any you mind getting early, except maybe Shard of the Throne. So I think there's a big driver to get your relic as soon as possible and start forming your game plan around whichever one you draw and getting value. And this makes sense whether you're trying to buy the relic or whether you're trying to sell the relic, I think, because getting 4 trade goods for your relic shard that was doing nothing for you can certainly help kickstart your economy, get some more plastic on the board, I think.
There's nothing sadder than getting Scepter of Malphar in round 3 once all of the cards have been exhausted.
Yeah.
Luke, were you going to say something?
With regards to relics,
No, just I thought you were about to say something.
I mean, I don't. What I kind of the thing about relics is that there's a lot of the time where relics are instrumental to making a win happen, and the earlier like you get the relic, the more you can like plan around it. And the one that I kind of want to use as the biggest example of this is Dominus Orb, because it lets you like break a very significant rule. And I guess like Stellar Converter is kind of similar, but I'd say that's more defensive than offensive. But
Can we describe the relics as we go?
Okay, so Dominus Orb is the one that lets you move out of systems that have your tokens. So it's a really, really strong effect that just lets you ignore like one of the largest rules in the game. And Stellar Converter is the one that lets you blow up a planet if you have a bombardment unit. So both of them violate just like the baseline rules. And if you get that early and you can plan around it, you can put that bombardment unit into position, or you can get that fleet where it needs to go, like where it can be Dominus Orbed, like to a better place and stuff. Then you can plan around it and usually make wins happen. Whereas if you're like drawing it midway through the round, you may have already missed your opportunity.
Yeah, and it seems like this would be the case with almost all the relics, which I agree with Stads, like maybe the exception of the Shard Point, which is out of the agenda deck and into the relic deck. But because you don't want that, because then you're a target. But it seems like all the other ones, like I'm thinking Codex, the game I played 2 days ago. I had Codex and I almost used it in like round 2 or 3 for whatever that one's called.
Patience, do you want to describe the relics when you talk about them?
Yeah. So Codex is Codex is you get 3 action cards out of the discard pile when you play the Codex. And something we should also mention for people who are newer to POK that the relics, once you draw a relic using 3 fragments or 2 if you're Nazroka Alliance, or you've got the promissory note from Nazroka Alliance, Black Market Forgery, which allows you to trade in 2 fragments of the same color, or a wild one and one color for a fragment or for a relic. So you got those relics, and once you get one, it's yours. Nobody can stop you from using it in any way. And the Codex gives you these 3 action cards out of the discard pile. And there was like, what's it's not Unstable Planet. Like, what's the one that gives you the trade goods?
Uprising.
Uprising, yeah. So Uprising was in there, and there was like a 5 or 6 resource planet already on the board. Uprising was in there, and the one that gives you the allow to switch text was in there, and there was something else, one of the new action cards. Anyway, I can't remember, but I was in like round 2 or 3. I was like, maybe I'm going to use the Codex now. I waited in the end, but I was really tempted to use it at that point for like economic and whatever strategic advantages. So I agree with you, Stats. I don't think there's any of them where you want to wait. I guess my question is like, do the relics, besides the points, the Crown of Infidia with the Tomb of Infidia point and the Shard of the Throne point, do the relics speed up the game?
Yeah, I mean, there's 3 that directly or indirectly give you a point, right? So the Shard, which is a point, Obsidian, which is a 4th secret objective, which is most likely a point, and then the Tomb of Infidia, which is a potential point if you can track down, the Crown of Infidia, if you can track down the tomb, right? So the 3 of those, 2 of those are more or less taken from the agenda deck, so it's not like they're new points, but they're so much more likely to come out of a 10-card deck than a 50-card deck in any given game.
Plus, they can't be repealed away.
Right.
So given that the relics themselves are one of the elements that I mean, we're saying speed up the game, but what we really mean is the game is usually ending in round 5 rather than round 6. That's what we really mean. The time is similar in terms of the length of the game, depending on who's playing and the factions as usual. But I guess what I want to dig into here is, because those points are out there, and because that makes it the game end in round 5 usually. What is that doing to the whole strategic dynamic of the game, particularly in everybody's experience around the relic economy, but whatever other factors as well? Like, how are people approaching the relic economy and getting fragments and relics? Let's start with Stads. You haven't said as much as others, I think.
I think that blue tech and otherwise mobile factions are really, really good because they are able to score round 1 on average. If you can get units, if you can get infantry 2 systems away from your home system, I think this really increases your chances at scoring round 1, or sending a destroyer 3 or even 4 units away sometimes, to be able to get 2 adjacent to Mechatol, or systems and anomalies, or legendary planets, or systems adjacent to the board, that sort of thing. I also think it means that factions who were decent in base game but had a slow start have really fallen off the wagon. Factions like Nalu and Mentak have basically free fallen because they
Oh,
were
the
very,
Mentak.
very good at
Sadness.
scoring stage 2s, and they were very good at the sort of end game situation. But that end game situation isn't as relevant now, at least in a 10-point environment. And I think their disadvantages have been magnified and their advantages have been shrunk down. And they're just not very good factions anymore, in my opinion.
Deft, it sounded like you wanted to respond to that. Just, I know we're Mentak lovers. Are you feeling
It's
this?
just my soul just cries out for all the Mantic out there. Going from a triple S tier best faction of the game to absolutely unplayable over this expansion is just breaking my heart.
Do
You might be
really
the only
mean
person alive that feels bad for Mentak players.
that?
Yeah.
Do you really mean it that badly though, Def? Like, is it? Or are you being hyperbolic, or what do you?
I played a 14-point game and I didn't have fun with them. How is that possible? POK is insanity. No, no. You're allowed to have fun with them. Nobody will let you do.
No, but like, tell us why. Tell us what has happened to Mentak and vis-a-vis what Stads is saying.
So Stats got into it a little bit. Mentak has always used Cruiser 2s to move around, but there's a race that's better at Cruiser 2s. And you don't actually get it online until round 2's tech pop if you teched round 1. Your late game superpower, mirror computing combined with pillage, is no longer a thing because games end at the first stage 2. If it's not a spend objective, then you lost. And if it is, then you still might have lost because you're behind from your early bad start. The only good thing about the start right now is that they can easily turn on their commander by just building 2 cruisers. But all of their leaders do nothing. They literally have no output.
No,
So
their agent's good. I'd say that the other 2 leaders are not very good, but their agent's good.
So what are their agent?
It's
and
1
leaders?
action card per turn.
It's more than that, because so I think what we all hinted at is that you can't feel sorry for Mentak because everyone hates to be pillaged, right? Their agent kind of takes some of that sting away. It says, hey, I'm going to pillage you, but you get an action card out of it. So it takes some, at least once per round, it lets you pillage without getting the other player mad at you, I think. And I think that's more important than the action card you draw yourself. But I think the action card you draw yourself on top of that is a nice benefit as well.
Sure, that's okay. But so when I look at it in the numbers way, right? There's a ton of agents, at least 3 I can think of, that give you 2 to 3 value. Either a whole command counter, Mahakt and Imperium, or you upgrade a destroyer into a carrier if you are Arborak, or you build 2 dreadnoughts at your Warson with what? Like, the size of these effects is just so inconsumable with 1 action card for me and less bad meta against me, right? And this is my best leader, right? my hero and my commander are borderline useless.
Yeah.
So, sorry, go ahead.
Like, it's, and honestly, I don't even like the Mentak agent that much. For me, the beauty of Mentak was managing the hate, thriving in it, growing it, working your way around it, and this agent
real man of
doesn't even help
culture.
you necessarily. It helps someone else. It helps you manage it, but if you could manage it before, you don't need this agent now. so it doesn't do anything for you.
So let's step back out to the broader claim you made, Stats, which is the fact that ending the game earlier in round 5 is hurting some factions like Mendak, who's finished strong, especially with stage 2 spend objectives. Nalu, what's the difference with Nalu? Just because their leaders aren't very strong? Is that what people think, or does it have something to do with the timeline, like it does with Mentak?
I don't think you could attribute it to just one. It's equal parts those two. Stage 2s don't necessarily matter, so scoring them first isn't a huge benefit to you. And their leaders are probably worse than Mentak's, I'd say.
What are the Nalu leaders? Let's list the Nalu leaders for people.
Nalu's agent lets them look at the next agenda, but only when an agenda is drawn. So basically, you can look at the second agenda that will come up during the agenda phase. You can also show it to one other person, I believe, or is that something I made up?
Yeah, you can show one person, but
that's true.
They also made it an after timing window, which means you can't look at it and then use a veto or something like that to kind of maximize the advantage. It's really just, do I save my votes or not?
Yep. The commander is actually theoretically quite good. You can produce one additional fighter for their cost, and it doesn't go against your production limit. The problem with that, if I can get nerdy for a second, is you need to have 12 fighters on the game board, which is an awkward number, and I wonder if this is intentional from the designer of the game, because they start with 3. Their home dock has production 5, so you might build a carrier and 4 fighters or something. And if you do that twice, you'd have exactly 11 fighters. If you build a forward dock, the highest value you can probably get is also on a free resource planet, production 5, so this doesn't help you. So you won't be able to unlock it until round 3, after you've already used your build round 3 probably. So it's just super awkward to get the most use out of it unless you draw a wonderful action card that can help you. And their hero is at the end of the status phase, you can force every other player to give you one promissory note from their hand. Usually they just throw their political secrets or trade agreements or something at you, and it gets completely forgotten about. Finally, their mech ability is it rolls +2 against someone who has a relic fragment, which usually does nothing late game because people will trade their relic fragments to try to get their relics. So it's basically a blank mech when the game really matters.
Mantis, are you in agreement with this, like that the shorter game is in particular what's hurting Nalu, because they're not, they're late game powers, and I'm thinking also of Neuroglaive here because that's hard to get online. That's what's making them weaker, or is it really just the agents for you?
I mean, their leaders being bad is part of it, but I think the other thing is Nalu's main weakness has always been their start, and especially like their starting fleet, right? So their starting fleet is bad. It had to be bad in base game because they had such an ability to turn the game around at the end of the game, and I don't think that's a thing anymore. I think they get punished more for their bad starting fleet because it's easier for players to take advantage of. And people may still be, dealing with a meta if you can't let Nalu get any ground because they'll punish you for it with a 0 token later. So until they shake that off, if they ever shake that off, I don't think there's much that they can do in that regard. They're going to be hit hard early, and they're not going to have time to recover, I think.
Just specifically on Nalu, I would also like to point out that games often don't just end a round earlier, they end like a round before the other 5 players can end it. It's usually not broken by initiative in my games. Of course, that still happens quite a bit, but way less than in base game. So being the ultimate tiebreaker, I have the 0 token, doesn't help us much if you only get to 9 and 2 other people get to 10 this round.
Wow, this is so important. This is so important, and I hadn't even thought of this really, Def. So what you're saying, to clarify, is that it's less of a, like, there are less players in the race for the round 5 victory, which makes the 0 less valuable. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, we started out saying this a little bit when we said that it doesn't have to be everyone getting to 10 at the end of this round, like it usually did in base game at round 6.
Yeah.
It's just one person has to get there without being stopped, and more often than not, there's 2 people being able to get there starting round 5.
Why isn't Winslane stopping the round 5 victories more often then?
I
It's
feel
hard.
like they do. It's just impossible to tell how many people need to be stopped.
Can I answer that question from Patience?
Yeah.
2 points. One is that it's hard. There are 22 secrets that will be left after everyone draws free, I think Mantis said. Trying to figure out which one of those secrets it could possibly be that someone needs to score is basically a crapshoot, right? You can't
It's
Yeah.
really
definitely
go through
different.
23 secrets and reasonably expect to prevent them all unless it's SAR and they literally just have an asteroid field or something like that. And 2, people are richer, which means you can usually put a little bit of that extra wealth to building a fat stack of infantry on your home system. And because the game ends earlier, people aren't going to have X89 or anything, and besides Mex counter X89. So I find that extra little bit of wealth can go a long way to stopping someone from taking your home system.
Okay, Luke, you haven't said something a bit like, what do you think about this, like this, and specifically this idea that there's it's ending in round 5, but not everybody's in the race to end in round 5, and why doesn't that mean we're not Winslane into round 6 more often?
Well, the big issue is that if you're a table of 6 players and 2 players can win in round 5, and the remaining 4 players, their only hope is to go to round 6, what generally ends up happening, at least in my experience, is the 4 players could stop one of the players, but not the other one. And so the player that they could stop is like, hey, well, why are you going to just like kingmake this other person? You should just let them try and stop me. But then, of course, that person can't without sacrificing like too much. And I don't know, in my experience, when the table tries to stop someone from winning, they usually mess it. Okay, I'm cutting out. I'm going to my mic.
Yeah, I'll say something. Maybe you try to figure that out for a sec, Luke. So this is really interesting, though. Like I haven't thought of this at all. Like the implications for the Winslane dynamic are really important because what Luke is saying is 2 people or 3 people or whatever have a realistic shot in round 5. So the table starts chatting about it, obviously, like usual. But the argument is, well, if you can't stop them, then why would you stop me? Because they're just going to win this round. And so the players who can't win that round have less motivation. So it's like reverse psychology that compared to like the normal round 6 Winslane, which just like can keep on going because 5 players or even all 6 players have a shot at winning that round, right? Am I catching that? Is that what people are hearing here?
Yeah.
It's
Is that what-
definitely alive, that thought.
Yeah. Do we think that that's going to lead the meta to be like talking more about Winslane earlier, like more round 4? Like, okay, what's going to happen round 5 in round 4, which is obviously happens sometime, but isn't always
I
happening.
think so, definitely. I think the meta will 100% switch to a more fighty meta with all the races that are available for it, and this thing we are talking about right now. The Bryans of tomorrow shall inherit the earth.
I have to disagree just a little bit because I don't think the fundamental problem with windslaying has gone away, and that's that you don't want to be the one doing the windslaying unless it gives you the win, because windslaying is hard work, and if you do it earlier, that makes it more likely for it to torpedo your own game, I think.
Yeah.
I think at least in base game, right, there's ways to do it where you're not making yourself in a worse position. With POK, if you're winslaying by using your hero, you're in a worse position. Your hero's gone. It's not coming back. So unless you're going to do it for yourself, or that it's the only way to make the game go another round, then you're not going to do it. So I don't think you'll see heroes come out on round 4, but maybe you'll see more aggression in round 4. But aggression that puts people in a favorable position, but not like chuck everything I have through the graveyard from prey type of stuff.
And there's another large problem that no one has touched on with regards to round 4, and the problem is you are missing potentially the most vital piece of information, which is what is that first stage 2, because it is usually at the second that stage 2 objective flips when you can instantly tell, oh no, this player is going to be a problem because they can score it. And or alternatively, you could be set up in quite a nice position. You've got all your trade goods banked or whatever, and then it flips and it's like have structures, and you're sitting there with like your home system space dock and one PDS, and you're like, oh, I guess I need to find a different way to win this game. And then you're kind of just done, unfortunately.
So the luck side of the stage 2 flip is counterbalancing the push for increased Windslaying attention in round 4, is what you're thinking, Luke.
I think to a degree, yes.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
while it is still possible, like still very possible to win without scoring a stage 2 objective, which we might like get onto in a little bit when we talk about scoring and everything. But there are going to be a lot of occasions where, as Piper said, if there are 2 players that can win in round 5, the reason why the other 4 can't is because that stage 2 wasn't one of the ones that they were wanting it to be. And so, like, in round 4, it might look like that everyone could have a shot. It very suddenly reveals who the front runners actually are.
Yeah.
I just want to say how fun I find that in these games, in POK games, you don't just sit there with, oh, Hakan and So both have 10 trade goods. I guess we know we will have to stop them next round, but we can't do it this round because it's always up in the air when the stage 2 flips. Anything could happen. I just find that incredibly entertaining playing those games.
It's made the game a lot more dynamic, and I'm just realizing through this conversation that I thought I just put it like down to there's more objectives. Like there's more secrets, there's 20 more secrets, there's 20 more publics, 10 of each kind, right?
Yep.
And so like I just thought that was why that was happening deft, but I'm realizing it's a combination of all these factors of the earlier endpoint and of the Windslaying dynamic, which we've described here, that is all making that more adventurous and exciting end. That's really cool. What else is going on here? People want to comment on that, or also Luke, you brought up the topic of scoring. Like, I think we should also move on to that as well. And I don't know what you wanted to say about that, but yeah, who's thinking what here?
Yeah. So on the topic of scoring, I'm pretty sure we said this in 101, but a lot of the time, your route to scoring is you score your 3 secrets, the 5 stage 1 objectives, and a support for the throne point, and then 1 bonus point, like Mechatol point, Agenda point, something like that, Custodian's point. And that path is still viable, but you've got 1 less round to score a stage 1. So the counterpoint is there are now a lot more of that bonus mystery point, relic points, agenda points. I think are like there's still probably the same amount, but there are more opportunities to get random points. But you've got 1 less public objective that you can score because the game's ending a round earlier. And that's kind of the delicate balancing act that you have to decide, like, where's your path coming from.
On the topic of random points, I've also seen that supports are a lot less exchanged. Of course, that still happens, but it's a lot more often that I see players end up with two supports and in some extreme cases 3 in a game, just because of how the game shook out, because of all the upsets and wild swings in events.
Yeah, I've seen a lot fewer support swaps too, and I don't know if I can pinpoint a reason why for it, but it's definitely something I've noticed as well.
I guess it's both that you can win without a support exchange, and that if the situation is right, you don't mind giving a guy their 2nd support, because they are either so far behind or they are just giving you that much benefit. It's a lot easier to pay for a support when you have such insane things to give them for it.
Maybe that's part of it too, Deft, what you just said. There's more to offer, right?
Yeah. The agents and commanders are both sellable, right? And you can always threaten to mod supernova somebody's fleets and not do it for support.
So the whole trade economy of the game has been enriched, and the support is obviously one of the most valuable, if not the most valuable single piece in that economy. But there's just more value out there to exchange it with.
Yep.
That's a cool thought. That's a cool thought. Stats, what do
Is
you
it-
think about that? Oh, sorry, Mantis, go ahead.
I was going to say another thing you bring up is the commander being tradable. So I think support serve two purposes, right? It's a point, obviously, but it's also, hey, this guy probably won't attack me if we swap. So you can get that second point without giving up your point by trading alliances, and you'll say, hey, this guy won't attack me because we've traded alliances, and you can do that without the support swap. And maybe you save the support swap for later or something.
Well, I would argue ceasefires were already out there for it, but I guess alliances are better for this purpose, because the other person is not going to give it back if you betray their trust. While a ceasefire can always be traded again, so I guess I agree, even though I started out not agreeing.
It really depends on the alliance, I think. I think some, like, for example, if I get Nomad's Alliance and I get my flagship out, like, okay, I don't need that anymore unless I'm planning on going hog wild with my flagship for some reason. So now I can attack Nomad again, right? Like, it just depends on the alliance.
Well, yes, but then they sell it again for the same outrageous price you paid. I don't know. I don't like doing that. But yes, I agree. Sometimes you can get rid of it.
The Nomad Alliance is a particularly interesting one just because it has so much, like, it's 8 trade good value straight up, right? So depending on whose flagship we're talking, that's really attractive.
I would argue there are quite a few flagship not worth 8 trade good.
Fair enough. What if just on this question that Mantis raises of the alliances, or I guess we've all been talking about it, and the value of the support in the trade economy, do people have other thoughts on that particular dynamic? I know we're kind of off the topic of the general topic we were talking about, but this is an interesting piece of POK.
I think you support swap just like you did before. Boring, but it's getting your support out of your hands early, I feel, is still so valuable because it means you can't be extorted for it. Muat can't threaten to supernova your fleet if you don't have a support. So they can still threaten you, but they can't threaten you for a support specifically if you don't have it available. It's not like you can take it back and give it to them. They have to look at some other price.
So I think Muat supernovas your fleet using their hero. That's what you're referring to, right, Sats?
Yeah, that's the threat I'm referring to. And if you have your support, then they can ask for it. And I think that's a negotiation advantage for them. It's hard for you to wriggle out of that one if they're sticking to the hard line. But if you don't have that in your hand, it's off the table. You're safe.
So the heroes present more nuclear options, which can lose you your support through extortion. Has anybody even seen that in games? I don't think I've seen a lot of that.
No, I think the Muat hero in particular, right? If Muat's your neighbor and he threatens to Nova Seed you if you don't give up your support, like, you just laugh at him. Like, as soon as he Nova Seeds you, he's in a worse position.
Or you do give it up and then you attack Muat.
I think I've seen the opposite a lot. People get paid to support to use their hero in some way that benefits both them and another player.
For winslaying, perhaps?
Things like that, yeah, but also just stealing Mechatol Rex to put it in between your right door neighbor and yourself, for example, as ghosts.
Neat.
Yeah, do you have a couple examples, Def? Can you unpack that ghost example?
So the ghost hero exchanges 2 tiles. They can be any except the ghost home system and Wormhole Nexus. And maybe ghosts don't care where they put Mechatol as long as it's away from everybody, but another player could, and then maybe there's a support value in that being close to that player. I've also seen somebody getting paid as a SAR, a support, to hero the Winslay's home system, that being yours truly.
Sorry, can you explain what happened exactly?
So, both myself playing Titans and another very good player, Zipolin, playing Nomad, were ready to win in round 4, as it turns out. And Sar was my right door neighbor, and she broke support to get her space dock next to my home system, and then I offered her my support back to her because she broke support to do this. And she said, okay, well, I'll still use my hero, but only if somebody else also pays me a support, not just getting paid one to not do it. And so that my home system could be taken.
And what does SAR's hero do again? I don't actually remember right now.
SAR's hero is choose a system next to one of your space docks. Every infantry and fighter in it dies.
Oh yeah.
It's literally just it's just kaboom.
I like how many of the heroes can be described by that.
Let's make a list of the Kaboom heroes real quick. So that's Sar's Kaboom hero, which I have actually not seen used to devastating effect like that. But okay, what's another Kaboom hero?
Muat's hero, obviously.
Yeah.
Cabal's hero.
Cabal's hero is normally a dud, but when it goes off well, it is a kaboom.
How does it work?
So
every ship around your space docks goes through a gravity rift. If it rolls badly, you get it as a captured unit.
I also have not seen that used to devastating effect. Mantis, go ahead.
I was playing one game and I was Barony and Cabal managed to get a space dock on Mechatol, and he used it and captured both of my dreadnoughts that were next door. These are dreadnoughts that had NES and Uranium. And then after he captured those two, he's like, "Oh, maybe I'll use Vortex and capture a third one from you too." So I was playing the game with two dreadnoughts. It was really annoying. And then other players started killing all of his space docks, so I couldn't even go blockade one to get him back because there wasn't any left for his home system.
Because that's how you get your units back from Cabal.
Yeah.
Blockade their space dock.
Sounds about right.
So obviously the Mahakt, Sorcerer King's hero, which allows you to move any fleet into another fleet somewhere on the board, is another Kaboom hero.
Yeah, that's like the Yssaril version of a Kaboom, where it's not directly Kaboom, but it's pretty much the same thing.
What's another one?
Sardak hero, I would argue, is pseudo Kaboom. It lets you take a planet, and the amount of counterplay is kind of limited to one action card.
Do you have parlay? No? Okay, goodbye.
Yep, basically. Maybe Necro hero. It lets you scrub a planet if it is a tech skip planet.
I think I see the Necro planet or Necro one used more often on a Necro planet just for the tech.
Usually.
Yeah.
But it could. Maybe L1 hero if we're really opening up the definition, because it lets you teleport your flagship and dreads everywhere onto someone's home system, and if they have fleet logistics, then they kaboom with that fleet.
Aren't you finding that L1's hero is just because to use L1's hero there has to be no ships in the system, right? Aren't you finding that that's just getting countered when L1's in the game?
In theory.
I think if you use it as a prize in an early round, you can get good use out of it. But yeah, towards the late game, if people see it coming, although at the time they have to counter other things as well, so it's not just you.
Also, something I really wanted to talk about in this, and I kind of forgot until now, is that the economy changed so very much from base game. Out with the old Magi math, get something new in here. Influence is worth more than resources these days. It's actually kind of expensive to lay around ships to gum things up. Like, free influence could be an Explorer and the Sarveen Frog. Free influence, yeah.
I fully agree. I think I'm spending trade goods on tokens basically
more
every
often than
round.
on units. Yeah.
If I was to make a very hand-wavy estimate on the new Magi math, it would be 5 influence is equal to 4 resources. Sorry, 5 resources is equal to 4 influence. Sorry, I got that backwards.
Okay, I want to go around the tape.
Oh, I'm actually on, like, I'm even more extreme than that. I would argue that free influence, like, free resources is exactly worth 2 influence right now, because I spend the stupid free 2/1/1 planet as a command counter so very often.
Oh, you mean vice
I can't
versa?
even say so.
3 influences worth 2 resources? Is that what you mean, Def?
No. So influence is worth more than resources, so it has to be less than resources.
Oh, okay, got it.
Like, you have that very awkward system, right? The industrial cultural one that is a 1/1 and a free resource 2 influence planet. I can't remember the names. Pakal, maybe? Doesn't really matter. So that system is usually Dabut as Ihan, because Dabut as Ihan is now a good system because it has free influence in it. You want to spend it as influence unless you have enough trade goods to just do it otherwise, because there's just so much value to gain with actions.
I want to go around the table on this one of the like 3 resources equals 2 influence value. So influence is leapfrogged resources in POK. So Luke, what's your take on this one?
I agree, but I'm not sure I agree to the same extent, because when Hyper mentioned spending a 3/2 planet as influence, I kind of like threw up in my mouth a little bit. And I think, I don't know, maybe that's just me being like old and not wanting to change. Like, maybe I need to embrace that.
So the
But-
first 2 times I did too. I agree. But then I started to let it suffuse my system, and now it's just a little bit disgusting.
But I think what is worth mentioning at this point is there are quite a lot of factions that can survive on very few resources, but there are exactly 0 factions that can survive on very few influence.
I
Because
would argue
Yeah.
that's not really a change in POK per se, or rather the circumstances changed. Because in base game, you can just take your 2 in the status phase and live off of that, take an action and pass. In POK, you get eaten alive. People need to be in places, and you need influence for that.
How about you, Mantis?
Mantis, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely in the boat that they're, you know, equal to this point. I don't know if I would go and say influences more, unless for specific factions, right? So for a faction like Argent, where you're focusing on destroyers or scotch and resource, then yeah, you're probably spending a lot more on influence than you would otherwise. But I think the other thing to note is the trade good economy is a lot heavier in POK. There's a lot more ways to get trade goods. So you're more often than not struggling for the resources you would for your fleet. So maybe it's more of a sense of, hey, I got the resources for my fleet already, so now I have all this left over for influence, and so now I should take a look at which of my planets I should shuffle so that I'm maximizing my spend. And so if we're looking at it like that, I think that's why I consider them more equal. I think the trade goods being used for either kind of equalizes that if you're in a game where the trade goods are flowing, at least.
I think that's the fundamental point, and that's exactly what I was going to say about the trade goods, Mantis. I think that I think that influence and resources have kind of they've kind of equalized in a way. For me, we need I want to play devil's advocate. Like I agree that obviously the influence economy and the number of command counters that I'm going to use, especially if I'm getting Scanlink or Dark Energy Tap to explore more with, is going to be much higher. And many factions like are like Necro, Mahawk, like there's so many factions who want to use more trade goods for different reasons, or not trade goods, more command counters, which means that that influence is that much more important. But also, isn't it true that in POK at the very same time, like plastic is so much more important, and there is more violence, it's more frequent, there's more to do with your plastic. So like for me, it's like they've both been amped up, and the only thing that's really changed is the availability of both through the planet attachments and all the other pieces of the richer economy. But
That's
really,
not the only thing that changed.
okay,
There's
but I'll just finish the thought and just say, like, with the trade goods, which is what was picking up with Mana said, like I'm rarely going into a round 5 with 10 or more trade goods. Like that was getting to be normal for me, or had been normal for me for a long time in base game. But I'm spending those trade goods, and they're getting spent on CCs, they're getting spent on Plactus, like they're just getting spent on all those things. So anyway, I know I'm going against the grain a little, but go ahead, Def.
I just wanted to add that, so in this whole resource versus influence thing, which is a little off topic to what you were saying, it's not just the availability of trade goods and influence and resources changed. The availability of opportunities to spend influence for very beneficial things has changed. In POK, there's a ton of things you can buy with influence that are really fucking good. For example, the Muat Mac with Starforge and the Commander also comes to mind, where you can spend 3 influence on gaining a trade good and 6 cardboard, which is 3 resources value plus a trade good for 3 influence. Obviously, this is not going to be true for all races, but there's so many opportunities where you can get plastic for influence. Freelancers also comes to mind. The spend a trade good to get a Mac also comes to mind.
Well, even just with base technologies, Scanlink drone network, a new technology, you have to spend a token to make it happen, to activate a system. Dark Energy Tap, another new tech, you have to spend a token to activate a system without planets to make it happen. On the flip side, one of the other new technologies, AI development network, it gives you free resources. So you can use those free resources and use your other resources for influence. Like everything's pointing that direction, I feel.
I just want to also point at another extreme scenario where influence is just straight up better than resources. Titan starts with Scanlink. You get also Cyrene and unlock your commander. You activate one of your tiles to build in it. And then you get to explore Sarvine and get a trade good. And you also built units there and moved in and maybe brought cardboard with you. Like, there are some insane economic things you can do if you have enough influence for it. But if you don't, then you just sit there like, I guess I draw 2 cards.
Another angle on this whole resources versus influence thing. Before POK came out, there was a lot of chatter, at least among us non-playtesters, that the agenda phase would matter more. And clearly the agenda phase is based sort of on your influence of your planets. That's how many votes you have. Do you find that this changes the value of influence necessarily? Is the agenda phase more important in POK? There's one less of them if the game ends in round 5.
I would say that, well, other people should also talk about, but I would say that the agenda phases you care more about because of how just the timescales happen to shake out, and the ones you don't care about, you just can, I don't know, not pay attention to at all almost, which is, I think, a great thing because then more votes are spent in more interesting places.
Luke, I want to get your take on the implications for the agenda phase. And then also, if you want to do that one quick and then segue into some of your main thoughts, because we know you have a bit of a timeline to be with us.
Yeah, the agenda phase is strange because I find myself a lot of the time being very indifferent about the results of a lot of the agendas, where it's like, I mean, sure, I'd prefer it to go one way, but I'm not going to pay any money at all to ensure that it does. And in POK, I think there are a few more agendas that matter, although I don't know, I haven't actually gone through the agenda deck and seen, but
it feels like just that there's a little bit more, like a little more excitement.
Like a tiny bit, but I think it might actually just be because everything is slightly more dynamic rather than the agenda deck is more dynamic itself.
Well, it certainly matters that we've gotten rid of all the elect planet stuff, and that's all.
I am so happy about that.
Into attachments.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But go ahead, Luke.
But I think in a game, there's usually going to be one agenda that will matter a lot, and then however many there are left, 5 or 7, I guess, agendas that are kind of just yeah, these are things that are happening and will affect the game in some minor way. Actually, a lot of the time it's I just vote against on laws so that nobody gets that secret objective for having 3 laws in play.
Hey, Luke, so you have about just a limited amount of time left with us. What are some of your main thoughts about POK? If you were to say strategically, either stuff we've already talked about or stuff we haven't even touched on yet.
I think I'm really enjoying how open the game is and how I said dynamic before, but I'm going to say the word dynamic again because I think there are a lot more things happening at all points of the game, which is really nice to see. I feel a little bit sad for the factions that have been left behind, which are specifically the 1 carrier start factions that don't have any way to make their round 1 better. But
everybody cries out for Mentak.
Yeah, Ghosts, Mentak, and Gnarly are obviously they're the 3 main ones that I feel sad for. But
can you talk about Ghosts for 1 sec? Because I'm finding Ghosts the hardest POK faction to wrap my head around because their leaders are so dynamic. I'm my brain is just not dynamic enough to keep up.
Yeah, it's because Ghosts kind of fall into a very strange predicament where all of their leaders are weird. The commander requires you to do some serious serious movement gymnastics to get much benefit from it. Their agent is useful sometimes. Like, you'll end up using it, but it won't change too much. And their hero is very impactful, but not very obviously like beneficial. Like, it's not like the Tsar or the Muat one where you just directly blow something up that you didn't want to be there. It's much more like obscure. You have to think of like a way where it's actually going to be helpful and put work into it.
Can you describe how it works?
So the way that it works, they choose two systems that contain wormholes or their units, and they switch them, like their actual positions on the board, so they can steal planets and stuff.
I actually like their hero. I think the other one you're talking about, like the Muat one, it's like it's used almost defensively to wipe out, a fleet near you, so it can't hurt you. I think the Ghost, maybe second only to the Mahawk hero, can be used to help you score a stage 2 that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And I think the main way you can do that is to move, and it's dangerous, but to move the gate next to whatever bunch of planets you need to control for a control objective. Because once you move the gate, then your home system fleet can move out and take what you need. But I do agree that their other two leaders are a little weak. I think the other thing with Ghost is, so you have all these one carrier factions that kind of got beefed up, like Arboric, right? And so it's like, well, here you struggle to fill out your slice quickly, so you have these extra tools to do it. Ghost wants the opposite direction. It says you struggle to fill out your slice quickly. Here's this other system off the game board. Go for that instead. And now you're even further behind in filling out your slice.
Yeah, Malice is really interesting. I played a Ghost game recently where I did go for it, and it worked out okay, but you just feel like if someone blows on you slightly, not even like a full, just like a little birthday cake blow, you crumble.
Yeah,
You're done. And I don't think I think that's what makes the faction so darn interesting. You have all these crazy tools, and you have a kit that can win a game with the hero, with your mobility. But you need to talk your way out of trouble. You need to. You cannot rely on your plastic doing that. And I think that makes them a very variable faction, depending on the player and table.
Okay, I want to say a couple more things about Ghost, just because we fully unpacked it here. So how is it you get the Malice so quick? And then we've neglected the mech as one of the pieces of their new toolkit, which is maybe one of the most powerful things after the hero. But first, Malice. How do you get there, Steph?
So the Ghost agent is you exhaust it to make a system with an alpha or beta wormhole adjacent to all systems that have a wormhole. I think I got that phrasing correct.
Alpha, beta, or gamma.
So how it works is if you put your token on Malice, which is off the game board and only has a gamma wormhole and is normally inaccessible, you then flip your agent, which makes your home system that has a delta wormhole adjacent to Malice, so you can move your starting carrier. And this flips Malice and then makes it accessible to the rest of the table through alpha and beta wormholes that are now revealed. Malice is a great planet, by the way. It's a token per round, and it also can give you 2 trade goods or turn all your commodities into trade goods.
I'd like to call it a 5 trade goods system.
Yeah. But it's also your one carrier being used, so you have to build 1, maybe 2 more to fill out the rest of your slice. And Malice is maybe one of the most exposed systems in the entire game. So if someone sees a little pinky Ghosts fleet sitting there worth 5 trade goods, as Piper put it, they might be coming for it, and they have more muscle than you do.
Yeah, you hope you get the DMZ or else you're in trouble.
Yeah. Or you get Paradise World, and then everybody wants it even more, which is an attachment that makes it worth 5 influence in addition to the 2 trade goods.
That I have not seen. Any last thoughts on Ghost? I just admit that I've only played them once, and I've yet to really master it.
I think the Ghost's mech is largely useless, but that's my take. I feel like between the if and the flagship, so the Ghost's promissory note that lets other people place wormholes for them, and the flagship, and Omega wormhole generator, which lets Ghosts move around wormholes as well. Those are all better ways to manipulate wormholes than the mech, I believe. But I haven't studied it enough to be very confident in that.
Not only are the mechs not worth much, they actually can be negative, right? Because in the base game, you can sell the if, which was mentioned, to move a token around. Now, if I don't trust my ghost player, I'm not going to buy the if, because you can buy the if, you can use it to put a token down, you can activate your system, and then the ghost can laugh at you, pop one of their mechs, and move the token you just placed, negating the entire sale.
Oh, that's cruel.
I think the mech is just another tool for them to not be relying on the blue tech game. Like this just lets them not tech into wormhole thingamajig if they want to get their own wormholes.
But I love wormhole thingamajig. That's fair though, Piper.
Their
Okay,
other
Luke.
faction tech got a lot better.
Okay, Luke, back to you. I diverged this off Ghosts for some strange reason, and you were in the middle of saying something else. Weren't you?
Probably, yeah, but it can't be too important because I've completely forgotten it.
Okay, cool. Strategically, we were talking in general, and I want to get us back, and I want your thoughts first, Luke, because I know you're going to go in a bit. We've talking about the shorter, faster, or the round 5 finish, but the one thing we neglected to talk about the strategic implications of that, which is obviously a big question strategically, is just what that's doing to tech timing and tech paths. And I feel like this overwhelming desire to have more of these crazy new techs in the game, and especially being pulled towards the relic economy. But the fact that the game's shorter means there's less opportunities to tech. So, how are you dealing with that, Luke?
I think while that is true, there is now no excuse not to follow the tech secondary round 1. I think it's very easy to get the money that you need round 1, and there are most of the factions, if not all, will be doing that. Because if you don't, you're missing like one of the 5 techs you're going to get during the game.
I want to make a tangential point on that. There's no excuse if you need it, but maybe you don't need it at all, and you're just not gonna if you have the good techs you want. Because there are no stack objectives as much. Sometimes you just decide to not do it at all because those 4 resources and free influence is better spent elsewhere if you already have your game-winning techs.
Yeah, I'd say it's easier to tech round 1 if you want to, but it's also less important to tech round 1 than it used to be.
Because of the objective.
Yeah.
And then your tech path needs to be super, super lean. It's like, I have 3 techs. How am I getting the most impact out of that? Realistically, you will end up getting more techs than 3. You will end up getting a tech from agendas, or you'll like get enigmatic device, or you draw one of the action cards that gets your tech, or something. But it's very important that you have a plan in round 1 of how you're going to get like the most impact out of the very limited tech options that you have.
I think that's very fair. But
go ahead, Seth.
I want to say, Piper, there's still a 45% chance in any given game that a tech objective flips. So I think you can ignore tech objectives somewhat, but it's not like they're shiny Pokemon or anything. They're still around. You still have to.
I care about them when I see them.
Okay.
If it shows up, I'll take care. If not, I don't want to think about it.
Okay.
Back to the tech path in general, Luke. Were you in the middle of saying something?
Yeah, and I think where this tech talk is inevitably going is back to the color blue, and is blue still the greatest color? And the spoiler answer is yes, it definitely is. It's still the best. The Gravity Drive is still an absurdly good tech, and Blue got other good techs as well. And that's the end of that. No, okay, let's elaborate a bit more, right? Because movement's still important, really important. The new techs that the blue color got are Dark Energy Tap, which allows you to do the frontier exploration, and it gets you better retreats as well, but that I think is kind of secondary most of the time. If you're getting it, it's usually for the first part. And the frontier explorations open the door to quite a lot of nice things, including breaking the progression rate for techs, action cards, and secret objectives. although it happens like randomly. But all three of those things can be very nice. And then the other blue tech, Sling Relay, has a word on it, and that word is action. And that is like the best thing that you can ever see on a card is the capital letters spelling out action, because that means that you use it on your turn and it doesn't cost you a command token. That's beautiful.
So it's
Absolutely agree. And
It's a stool, yeah.
blue green has always been a viable tech path, and Sling Relay plus I forget the name of it, the green biostim,
Biostims.
which is one green prerequisite, which most people don't really care about Daxiv at all. So an alternative to Daxiv is almost a no-brainer, I think. The alternative to Gravity Drive is a tough decision because, like you say, Gravity Drive is one of the best techs in the game. So I think blue-green is even more viable if you go Sling Relay and Biostims. You get 2 stalls per round. One of those stalls can put a ship on the table. And it's hard for people to work around that you haven't done anything for 2 actions except for add a ship to the table.
Isn't there a fundamental tension here, though, between, and I'm finding this at least, between what Luke said, the imperative to go lean on tech versus this great idea of having Sling Relay and Biostims, which, like, where does that fit in my lean path? And let's list the other ways to get tech, because I think one of the counter arguments is, well, there are lots of other ways to get tech besides Ixthian Artifact now. So what are they all?
There's a couple agendas. There's still the one where if you have ships in a wormhole, they blow up and you get tech. There's the one where you get elected and you grab a tech and you have to lose a fleet supply or something for every prereq it has. There's a couple new action cards. There's the wonderful one, Divert Funding, which lets you lose a tech and then research a tech. So you can go something like Anti-Mass and then Gravity Drive, and then you forget Anti-Mass and get Sling Relay. That can be really cool. There's Enigmatic Device. It is from a Frontier Exploration as an action, which is
2 of those,
wonderful. Yeah, there's 2 enigmatic devices. As Luke said, it's wonderful that it takes an action. You spend 6 resources to gain a technology. There's a new relic called Mauve Worlds, where you don't vote during an agenda phase, but you can still play riders, importantly, and you can gain any one technology. Note that is gain. So even if you have no red tech or yellow tech at all, you can grab War Suns. Not saying you should necessarily, but it is a possibility.
I've genuinely never seen it be anything except Assault Cannon, War Suns, and Light Wave, even though integrated is still the best one.
Am I missing any new
Yeah.
sources?
There's an agenda that you elect a strategy card and then everyone does the secondary of it. So if that goes tech, it just gives everyone an additional tech, basically.
And isn't there one more action card?
Yeah, there's the one where it's you fight someone. When you're fighting, you play it and you can upgrade, like you get the technology of a unit in the combat. Like you research it.
Yeah, Reveal prototype.
Yeah.
That's it, yeah.
Mantis, are we missing anything?
There's also Reverse Engineer, which lets you take an action card from the discard pile, which could be used for tech if we're being really obnoxious about it.
And there's still Focus Research, obviously.
You covered Plagiarize, right? The one you copy neighbor's tech.
Plagiarize, yeah.
That was Codex.
So I think that's a total of, now I think I might have lost track, but I think I counted 8 other ways to get tech, 8 other things that allow you to get tech. And then, like you said, if that agenda goes secondary for everybody, then that's like 6 people who got another tech. Anyway, so that partly, like, I guess unlocks the tech scarcity a little bit that's limited by rounds. So maybe people have comment on that, or let's just unpack tech a bit more. Like, what are people strategically thinking about tech?
So I definitely have something to say on Luke's point about the pinnacleness of blue tech. As in base game, you still need a very good, very strong, very reliable way, which is usually grab drive, to get your infantry and ground forces and mechs and whatnot to where you're going to take those planets for control objectives or to defend your things if somebody attacks you. If you have some kind of good way to do that without blue tech, then I think literally all of the other techs are better for you, so half the factions. But if you don't, then you need to go blue now. Like, it was previously not necessarily a need, you just happened to did it because it was the best, but now you just need Craft Drive if you don't have Saturn Engine 2s, or Strikewing Alphas, or the Sardak Commander, etc. And as a corollary to that, Duranium Armor became the best red deck.
Oh, I want to talk about that. But keep
Okay.
going.
No. Let's hear your reaction stats.
I both love and hate Duranium Armor, and I really want the thoughts of the panel on this. I've been playing with the battle calculator a little bit, and in one given fight, Duranium Armor is roughly equal to 1 extra infantry. That is basically a fact. I've run it for different mech counts, different infantry counts, whatever, it's that. So that makes me think Duranium is generally, that's the part of me that thinks Duranium is generally quite bad, because 1 extra infantry, it's not nothing, but it's a whole tech for that. You think you could go Carrier 2 or something instead. However, Duranium Armor lets you win more, which is normally a bad thing. But let's say you need to take a key planet and you need to hold it. Having your winning army be healthier and ready to take on the next challenger is extremely important in that scenario. So that's when Duranium can be very effective.
So let's explain the left out, like the implicit thing here, which is that Duranium works on mechs as well.
Right.
Yeah. So
Which is kind of a buff to it. And there's also some factions which have sustained damage in cool places as well.
Yeah, like on like Titans on cruisers.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
even though it works on mechs, and that seems really cool, it's still only roughly equal to 1 infantry.
Okay, let's hear other people's responses to this.
I
So
agree with your point.
Mantis?
Go ahead, Mantis. I just wanted to agree with stats.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's on paper, it's actually. I don't know if I agree with it. It's only worth 1 infantry. So
I have run the calculations. There are obviously exceptions like the Sardak mech or Barony's NES, but in general,
Nazroka.
it's about 5%. Yeah, Nazroka as well, maybe.
I think that's probably due to the fact that most ground combats aren't these grand combats that you think of. So right, so if you go into Duranium thinking, oh man, I'm going to be able to sustain mech like 8 times this combat, you're probably not going to have a combat that goes more than 2 or 3 rounds. It's rare that you do. Obviously, it happens. So I think the times where you have big combats, Duranium is absolutely essential. But if you tech into something for a scenario that you don't actually use, you just wasted your tech. And I think Duranium is one of those traps where this is so powerful in the right circumstance, but are you really going to end up in that circumstance to need it?
Yeah, Luke, what do you think about this Duranium question? And then maybe because I misunderstood when you had to go, but now you have to go in 4 minutes. So maybe segue into whatever your most important thoughts are you want to share before you take off.
I think Duranium is better, yes, but it is better than a tech that we were seeing like pretty much never in base game. So it is better than it was. I think it's definitely up there in like the top half of techs now, but I wouldn't say it's like exceptionally amazing and that as every faction you should be like, hey, I'm beelining to Duranium Armor because it's good. Like, I think there are certain factions it works amazingly well on. Sardak was mentioned, and I'm going to use my remaining 3 minutes to talk about Sardak because they are the new love of my life. As I said,
Very appropriate.
As I said at the start, Gomsekus is my favorite thing about the expansion, and Sardak are insanely cool now. They're just like, oh, they've got Valkyrie Particle Weave and Duranium, and then their mechs like 1v100. They're just like, they move about with no carriers. They've got like all these insanely unique options, and then as a bonus, their hero is like, hey, the Shard of the Throne is mine now.
This doesn't sound like a just sit there strategy.
No, but the thing is, that's the best part. It is. You sit there until the last action, and then you take the shard, and then you win.
And then you just share in their home system.
Yeah, great.
What is your favorite Sardak tech path, Luke? I think I know, but for
okay. So my Sardak tech path is you get Dark Energy Tap, you get Gravity Drive, you get Carrier 2, you somehow wrangle a skip to Light Wave, and then if you have spare time and money and whatever, you go up red, get yourself VPW, be happy. But your main goal is a Light Wave Carrier 2, purely for the home system dunk that you're going to do with your hero, because there is a lot of the time where you can get a single carrier 2 full of mechs to anyone's home system with Lightwave and just take it, and usually that ends up like either stopping someone who's going to beat you or taking Shard to win you the game, or just it does something, and it's such a good feeling because they can't do anything about it unless they have parlay. But then if you have a sabotage, they can't do anything.
Responses to that revolutionary. Actually, Luke, you got to head out, right? So, hey, thanks.
I'll listen to what everyone else has to say about that.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being with us, Luke. I'm sorry you got to go. I think we're going to keep going for a bit. We have a lot to say here.
Yeah.
So, but thanks for being with us, and I look forward to our next game. I can't believe like how much of a just sit there game you won that I was in the other day. Who were you playing?
Was it Imperium?
Mm.
No, I can't even remember.
There was a Nomad game.
That was ages ago. But yeah, I won the game too. Yeah, I think it was Imperium. Anyway, bye-bye. Thanks,
Okay.
See you, Luke.
Luke. Yeah.
I just want to come back to what Luke said. You could go AIDA and Varsons and do the same thing. I'm just saying.
Then you have to
Sorry.
build a Varson. That's expensive.
I don't know what is have to about building a Varson. I feel like it's a get to.
I think the key part of this plan is the Lightwave, which you can't do with 4 suns, right? Because then you're deep in 2 paths.
Yeah, maybe.
Seeing
Well,
a
you're only
Varson-
getting Duranium Valkyrie Particle Wave, right? So you just skip Sarvine and then you skip with the 2 blue skips you stole with your Varson.
Doesn't this also invalidate the point of the hero? If you have a
No, you
Warsun,
just
you may
use
as well
the
just win
Warsun.
but then you're losing a 12 resource Warsun to the. I mean,
I don't see your problem, Stats.
That's the ultimate flex. Like, I'm going to toss 12 resources in the trash just to take your home.
I've seen it happen. I've seen it in the game, and it won Lily the game. So
I want to imagine in this wonderful scenario, it also prevented someone from scoring Destroy Their Greatest Ship against the Warsun as well.
entirely possible.
So there's a lot to say about tech in POK. I want to ask a couple questions. One is, like, I feel old-fashioned and boring a bit, and obviously it depends on the faction I'm playing. But generally speaking, like, I'm just feeling like Ada and unit upgrades and destroyer twos in particular, but other unit upgrades are almost always like the best investment. And don't get me wrong, like I've played games where biostims and predictive intelligence, so I could rejig my command counters twice, biostims allowing you to refresh a tech or a tech planet, and predictive intelligence giving you 3 extra votes, but also allowing you to reshuffle your command counters once or twice if you have biostims during the round. Like those have won me games, but still, like I'm feeling old fashioned. I'm like just leaning like Ada unlocks tech unit upgrades, and unit upgrades make my plastic more powerful, and that wins me games. Is that like agree, disagree?
So I think the most important part of a unit upgrade is actually the increased movement, not the increased combat ability.
Fair.
So a lot of time you get the same thing out of gravity drive. So I think it's neither or at this point. I think they're both just as viable. I think Ada makes gravity drive less important because you can do kind of the same thing a different way. I think if you're starved for tech and you don't think you have the resources to follow up multiple times, gravity drive is the better investment because you can use that in all your ships. I think if you're in a situation where you start with 2 techs and also maybe you picked up tech round 1 or 2, then Ada can open up, all these upgrades that suddenly mean you don't really need gravity drive as much as you would otherwise.
Or just potentiates it, or allows you to bring your flagship along or whatever.
I think we keep circling back to this fundamental problem of how am I going to do invasion combat? Do I have a carrier that can be grav driven? Do I have cruiser 2s that can bring a mech each? The tech game starts and ends in base game, I think, at how do you answer this question? And the answer was always carrier 2. Sometimes dreadnought 2 if you felt very spicy. These days, there are a bunch of races that don't need to go that way, so they can get all kinds of unit upgrades for combat effectiveness, so that they just brute force their way through the encounters.
For example?
The Argent Flight definitely comes to mind here, as well as the Cabal. One with efficiency, the other one with just purely having more units.
Mm-hmm. And the
Barony
argent plate is
also.
just is because of the strike wing, the destroyers that can carry units, right?
Yeah, like so you have both the mechs that don't take up a capacity for the ground combat, and the capacity can be a fighter, and then the opponent doesn't have fighters, and all of their ships are sustained when the combat starts because of your faction ability and the AFB interaction. Another one is the Saturn Engines. They have 2 capacity and move 3. What the fuck?
Pretty good.
The Mohawked, I am rich, so I will just move 6 times in a round once, as in one move.
Yeah.
You get the idea. Once you have answered the question, how am I winning invasion combats? That's when you get to ask and answer questions like, how am I getting better at space combat? How am I getting more efficiency? How am I getting more economy? If those are purely secondary, but in POK you get to deal with those questions because there are so many other ways.
One of the ways I think is coming into at least popularity, but I'm not sure it's the best strategically. It might be, is War Suns, because they are much more affordable in general due to all the trade goods flying around and factions being richer in general. And AIDA also makes them quite a bit easier to get, basically removes one prerequisite from them. One of my favorite factions to go War Suns on is Argent, as you said before, because it gives them capacity and bombardment, which is delicious, but other factions can too. Do you guys think War Suns are legitimately more viable, or still potentially kind of a trap? I mean, the game ends one round earlier. That's one
It
that
depends
lets
which race
play.
you're thinking of. Mantac, they are worse for Mantac because everything is worse for Mantac. Anybody else? Yes, go War Suns.
Okay.
I'm
Patience.
I've played like I don't know what now 40 games of POK maybe. I don't maybe I've had War Suns once. And so again, I think that may be inertia, maybe I'm not being creative enough, but if I've got the space, the runway for tech, I'm much more interested in getting 2 or 3 unit upgrades as opposed to just War Suns. But because the combination of the limitations of the path and the expense of the unit compared to a much more, diversified fleet, that's my take. And I know there's going to be exceptions to that, and I'm going to get there, but I'm not there yet. What about you, Mantis?
I think I feel the same way about War Suns as I did in base game. I don't know if it's changed a whole lot in this. It's if it fits into your overall plan, I'd say add it on. I very rarely make that the central part of my plan. It's not worth the investment on its own. If you're halfway there and it's like, sure, I'll grab it now, I'd say go for it. But otherwise, I wouldn't build for it.
I feel
Yeah.
like there are some opportunities when it's great. Like maybe you ended up with Psychoarchaeology and found a red skip by accident, and you already had AIDA. Looking at you on RA, for example. Or you started with Sarbeam Plasma because you're playing Argent, not the other shit race that starts with those. And you get AIDA and boom, you're at War Suns, and you already have your destroyers that are great with it. Like, I feel like you accidentally end up in situations where War Sun is the right choice now, which is great, in my opinion. But
And that's
if
all
you're
I with
a race,
because
you
already
don't need
there, get it.
I think
Like,
I
if
need to
you're-
try. I think I want to try. I think if there's one faction that I really want to try with War Suns, it's Argent. Like if I can get the skip, if I get my Destroyer Tuesday, my Strike One Alpha Tuesday, like that's a perfect combo. Just War Suns and Strike One Alpha Twos. I'm not spending much on my Strike One Alpha Twos, so that's cheap. So I have the money to buy the War Sun. I don't know. I think that's where the one I want to try it with.
yeah,
The other one is potentially Jolnar, I think, because you are rich. Era's Siphons is still kind of a busted technology. It's the one that when you activate a Jolnar ship, they get 4 trade goods.
I actually
your-
They
think
can
Jolnar
go
got hit
into
really
War
bad.
Suns.
Okay,
in
first, what's your?
POK.
I want to talk about that. First, stats. What's your Jolnar War Sun tech path?
I would just be AIDA and then they can grab War Suns, but you probably want to go your standard Jolnar techs first, and then pivot into War Suns round 3. I think. Get the War Suns, and then use your hero round 4 to make those War Suns even scarier. So it'd be something like Gravity Drive and E-Res Siphons or Hyper round 1, Round 2 would be the other one that you didn't get, an AIDA. Round 3 would be the War Sun tech, and you build them. And round 4, you pop your hero, you lose AIDA, and you get Assault Cannon, perhaps. You get Integrated Economy, you get Light Wave, you get X89, and then you have very, very scary Peacemans ready to bring a united galaxy in love of the fish.
So I think another great fact for Warthones is Hakan. So Hakan starts blue-yellow, and they often get Gravity Drive for Dread 2. Well, now you can almost skip out on Gravity Drive by going AIDA, using that for Dread 2, and then going down red till you get Warsons.
Have you tried it?
I don't remember the last time I played Hakan. That's probably a while ago. Because the other thing is the Hakan hero, right? It's when you produce something, everything you produce is free that one production round.
Yeah.
So if you've got the fleet supply to build 2 Warsons, your flagship, and maybe 2 Dreadnoughts, like your hero just made you what, $30, $20? No, $40. Sorry, if you have production 5 there.
I vote the day when Raise a Fleet comes up while Hakan is unlocking War Sons with their hero. Yes, that is a scary next round.
Yeah, and if you see Hakan going down red and you sell them War Machine, you're a fool. War Machine is the one that adds 4 production to a build, because they just tack on way too much stuff with those cards.
Yeah, I think Hakan's like maybe one of the only 2 factions, them and Nalu, that I haven't played in POK yet. But I've seen this happen a couple times, and I've been next to Hakan lately when this happened. I think Jahan, I think that was our game last week, right? Deft, or this week, where Jahan was Hakan and did the double Warsun build.
I wasn't there, I don't think.
Okay. But yeah, anyway, I've been next to it, and like I was immediately, okay, like how do my whole game, like my whole strategy had to revolve around being next to Hakan when they did that. And I think that's actually the game on Monday that Luke won, that we couldn't remember what his faction was. But anyway, so I want to get back to this question though. Sorry, Stad, you were going to say something.
I believe Piper was saying Jolnar has been hurt by the expansion, which I very strongly disagree with, and I would like to hear your reasoning for.
So, all right, so if there's one race that got hurt by the expansion, I can't not say these, as every time I get a chance to, it was Mantak. But Jolnar is not as oppressive anymore as it used to be. They have good leaders and an okay mech, which makes them an okay faction. If they weren't busted before, which makes them a good faction. But they just get bullied now like they are supposed to be, in my experience. Like, sit a Cabal next to a Jolnar and see how long Jolnar stays alive if they don't pay tribute. Like, they start with a Dreadnought and 2 carriers that the Cabal can just steal because they have a single fighter. Or Barony, who gets paid trade goods to fight Jolnar.
In the Euro meta, because I know you play a lot of Euro games these days, Def, is that happening a lot, that degree of aggression?
So, usually I just get paid not to. But, so I had a 14-pointer game with Barony. And at every opportunity, every round when it started, my first thought was, I could go kill Jolnar now. Just on how the board was sitting. And so he paid me off every time to not do that. And come last round, he stole Shard, went to Megatol, got an Imperial point, and was very scary. So I used 2 Dreadnoughts and a Destroyer to kill 2 Dreadnoughts and 6 fighters in his home system, and take a planet that was defended by 4 infantry with 2 infantry. Because some races just get that much stronger as the game goes on in combat, while Jolnar still has the -1, and if they are getting the economy tax, they are maybe not getting the combat tax that they need.
Counterpoint stats? Do you think you
Counterpoint would be the 2 different angles. First, Jolnar research agreement, I think, got even better with the expansion, because as we were talking, the technology bottleneck is extremely real. You're always looking for ways to get around that, to get those unit upgrades, to get those more advanced techs as quickly as possible. And research agreement was amazing for that before, and it's even better now. I feel like Research Agreement is how you save Mentak even. You give them Cruiser 2 round 1, and suddenly they're a great faction again.
Great,
As an example. Maybe not great, but
playable.
they're definitely playable.
Playable.
So Research Agreement is extremely sellable, and you can use it to talk your way out of sticky situations. 2 is the commander gives you teeth. I believe it gives each PDS2 an extra about 0.2, 0.3 hits on its roll. So if you get a bunch of PDS2s, which you probably are going to be wanting to do because of the new structure objectives, and you get Graviton, suddenly you're firing 6 PDS shots and you're hitting about 4 hits on those with Graviton, which is usually enough to swing a fight into your way, into your favor, and you're getting paid for it happening. So even if you lose the fight, it'll be just barely. The fleet paid for itself via ERES, and you can go retake the system, and your PDS are fine. It's, I think, a very potent way to stay alive and not get extorted.
So I agree with everything you said. I just don't agree that it adds up to the conclusion you had.
Okay.
In a way, everything you said is true for most of the other races. They all got stronger the same way that either their plastic got better through their commanders, or their start got faster, or you get the idea, right?
Yep.
And in
Mantis.
base game, it's just so expensive to fight Jolnar, and you barely get anything out of it. But in POK, you literally get paid to fight sometimes.
Right.
Mantis, what are you thinking about this Jolnar discussion vis-a-vis the other factions?
I think Jolnar, they didn't get weaker, but they didn't get as strong as some of the other factions. So I think some of their advantages go away. I think another point is how weak they are in round 1, and another faction like that is Winu. Both of those factions, if you don't stomp on them early, they can kind of run away with things. So I think you're probably going to end up seeing 2 different types of meta. In a friendly game, you're not going to want to try to hit somebody round 1 or 2, right? That seems kind of mean, but I think in a competitive game, you're probably going to see that pretty often, where somebody takes Jolnar or Winu and then just gets eliminated in round 2 or something.
So describe why that's the case for Winu for everybody listening.
So their hero it lets them do the primary of any strategy card.
Everything is insane.
Yeah, and that's almost always going to be Imperial when they control Mechatol. So it's basically a point plus a second score for that round. So probably 2 points. The other thing is one of the new objectives, or new category of objectives, is all these structure objectives. The Winu mechs lets you get structures for free when you take planets with the mechs, plus you get the structures when you take Mechatol. So Winu don't have to spend any resources early game to invest in structures because they're just free for them. So they're set up for a whole category of objectives that everyone else has to work for. And that kind of snowballs as the game goes on. So early on, they're not that strong, but if you let them kind of get away with things, they will be.
Plus the advantages of having those PDS and space docks on the board.
Right.
Also, I think their commander is huge, right?
Yeah, exactly.
One of the best ones. It's just so powerful.
Yeah, so their commander it gets unlocked just by activating and moving something into Rex, whether you win or not. And then it gives you +2 on all the legendary planets, Rex, and your home system for ground and space combat, right?
Not legendary planets, just home systems and Rex.
No,
Oh.
legendary planets.
Yeah,
too.
legendary.
Is it legendary? Oh, my bad.
Yeah.
You know that agenda that puts a gamma in Mechatol? Never, ever. It's always a bad time. Don't.
So I really like the way you frame that, Mantis, with like that Jolnar and Winu have real snowball potential, that they need to be slowed down. My question to everybody else is that the same, because we're really into the factions, we've been really into factions here for a while, is that the same for NRA, Nazaruk Alliance, and Titans? Is the same?
So Titans, the need to slow them down might be there, but Titans don't have early game weakness that the other two have. Titans start off strong, like they start off with what they need for the most part. They do snowball, but not as easy to eliminate a Titans player as it would be to a Winu or
I
Jolnar.
would say both of those races are more consistent in their output throughout the game than Winu and Jolnar. Both of those start weak, and then by the late game they can get really scary. Whereas NRA and Titans are strong early, strong mid, and okay late.
NRA is strong early. I'm a little disagreeing with that. Although they
Have you fought a Mac round 2? Have you fought an unarray mech round too?
I have. It
How
actually
was
went
it?
pretty well. But
How did they work? How do they work?
how it worked? So the NRA mech is a unique mech in that it can fight in space combat. It rolls 2 dice that hit on an 8, so 0.6 hits per round, which is pretty darn good. It loses its sustained damage capability though.
And then on the ground, 2 on
And
6.
then on the ground, yeah, it's 2 hits on a 6 and it gets its sustain back. So it's very, very strong. Basically, probably the best mech for pure combat, maybe behind Sardak.
So what I want to wrap up the faction discussion with, because we should move into closing up the conversation with her final thoughts. Like, if you each had to pick the 6 strongest factions around the table, like you wanted to play a game with the 6 strongest factions in the game that was relatively competitive, what would the 6 factions be? Starting with whoever
I feel
wants to
like
go
it's
first.
impossible to answer questions.
Oh,
Okay,
I
I'll
don't
So-
know.
go ahead, Mantis.
I think Star of the base game factions is probably comes out on top for base game factions. I think Titans is probably the 2 of them would be my top 2. I don't know in which order. After that, I think it's Winu comes out pretty strong. Soul comes out pretty strong. Maybe the 4 of them throw in Khan and maybe Necro. Necro got a lot of nice tools that they didn't really need because they were strong enough base game, but those were pretty fun to play with. Maybe those are my 6.
Okay, so we got Soul, Mantis's Soul, Hakan,
Titans, Sar,
Titans, Sar,
Necro, and Winu.
Necro, and Winu. So you got a 7th for good measure, or was that 6?
No, those 6.
Okay, yeah. Cool. Okay, Stats, you ready, or do you want me to go?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Mine are sort of similar and sort of not similar to Mantis. I think I have Sar at the very tippity top. Sar is Emperor in our nobility ranking for all the factions. And you have Titans, who's the king or queen. And then you have a big list of factions, which are all very strong. They're all barons or regional rulers and stuff. And my 4 that round that out are Julnar, NRA, Nomad, and Necro. But I don't think the ones you put Mantis, Hakan, Soul, and Winu are misplaced there. I think they're all about the same power level.
Okay, Deft, let's have yours.
Honestly, I have no idea what races are strong. I just know which ones are weak. They are Nalu and Mentek.
Look at Connie Violin every time you talk about how weak the Mantek are.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say I like the other people's lists. It's really hard for me to choose, but I'm gonna definitely. I haven't played enough Titans, but everybody says this, and I haven't had a problem with them in games. But so many people have this opinion that I guess I have to concede. SAR for sure. NRA, I just have to put them in. There's just so many tools they have, even though we haven't talked about them much today. Necro, I'm gonna agree with. I'm gonna add Mahakt to my list. I just think that Mahawks, their hero, their influence-rich planet, 5/3/5 home system, their ability, their commander's ability to remove tokens, their ability to have more tokens because they get their fleet supply beefed up by stealing other people's tokens, the fact that those stolen tokens become ceasefires. There's just so many. I really like playing Mahawk, and I think they would be in there for me. The 6th is a really good question. Yeah, I don't know if it's Jolnar, Winu. Yeah, I'm gonna leave the 6th spot open for a bunch of different factions, maybe Soul, like Mantis said. Okay, Deft, you want to give it a crack?
Well, all right. So maybe I can't choose the strongest ones in my opinion, but I could choose the most fun ones.
Yeah, do it.
I have had the most enjoyment playing the Argent Flight because destroyers are love and destroyers are also life. The good cruiser race, not the bad one, so Titans as well. Mahawked because gotta catch them all. And Barony of all things. They are not boring anymore. 2 dreadnoughts now actually do win a combat against 3 war sons. No, I'm kidding, but almost. You just toss in 4 fighters and 2 destroyer 2s, and then you're golden. I guess I haven't tried Necro in the new version, but I imagine they're going to be really fun with the Max joining the space combat with the flagship. And I definitely loved playing Vinu. Actually having some teeth this time around. Just hold on to the 2 good planets and win the game with those, your home system and Mechanical.
So it's interesting that nobody said Cabal. I've definitely heard a lot of people thinking that Cabal are OP.
The strongest detriment to Cabal is that they have nothing to offer. They literally have nothing to offer. And that's like, you can't win 1v5. You can win a free-for-all of TI with relative consistency, but you can't win 1v5. And if you piss off everybody, then eventually that's what it's going to be. Especially if you are in a position to actually win.
I have Cabal in my large list of nobility, but I think I agree strongly with Piper. They don't have anything to offer, and they do have some really cool abilities that make everyone else super jealous, but they don't score points by existing like NRA does or Titans does. They don't have the ability to exist against 5 people like SAR does. They're not insanely rich like Hakan or Sol or Jolnar or Nomad. They aren't good at every single stage 2 objective like Necro is, and I feel like that's why they're not on the lists, if you asked me.
Yeah, to go on a point that Stat brought up is there's such a big group of factions that are right behind the leaders, right? So there's always going to be 1, 2, or 3 that people, lean towards as the top ones. But that middle group, like, they're just so close together, it's hard to pull out, who's 4th out of all the factions or who's 5th out of all the factions. You could literally answer that with probably half of them.
Yeah, even Muad, like we haven't talked about Muad in this context, but Muad's having some really strong games.
Yeah,
I think they're really good at getting 9 points.
That was extra on base game, the 9-point faction.
Yeah, I feel like all the Muats, the Arborics, they're really good at getting to 9 and not being able to win slay the person at 10.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems like also Turtles they've gotten better, but so much depends on what happens when they spin the wheel with their hero, which allows them to reveal the 5 agendas and do what they want, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've played extract games where I spun the wheel and got 0 points. I've played a game where I spun the wheel and got 3 points. So it's like, it's a giant crapshoot for them. You're basically putting your money into a slot machine and hoping that you get 3 7s, right?
But at least it's a meaningful slot machine.
That's true.
I think the only faction we haven't touched on at all is probably Imperium, which I think generally everybody agrees is the weak duckling of the new factions. But
we are missing Luke. That's why.
Yeah, that's too bad you didn't talk about them.
The
I feel that Imperium. Sorry, go ahead, Def.
I was just gonna say that they are the sit there and do nothing win game faction, which is, it's okay. They are fine.
You can't sit there do nothing. You got to get your ships all over the map to get all the dark energy taps. To get all
but you're not putting your ships in your opponent's home systems.
No,
like.
They feel a little bit like extra in base game, except their tech path is actually good. But I feel like if you aren't support swapping, Imperium are a legitimately good faction. But if they can't get 2 points from promissory notes, it is much more difficult for them to win the game. Just like extra in base game, you kind of had to rely on extorting a support with your cool abilities. And if you couldn't do that, you were playing from behind.
The other thing with Imperium is you're helping the rest of the table by using your abilities, right? So the important one is the extra movement if you activate a system next to anomalies. Now you can sell that, but if you're not careful, you're selling somebody to win rather than getting the resources you need to win.
Well, the basic dynamic with Imperium is I got to get all over the map to get those frontier tokens, and then I'm in the way, so I need to sell my abilities, not only to help you move further, but to move through me. And that's a really simple strategy. I think that's probably got to be Imperium's basic strategy if they're going to leverage their abilities. But I also think that that in combination with just their straight up ether stream ability to give people more movement.
Sabotage on a stick, perhaps?
Yeah, that's the other one, of course, with their mechs. Their mechs allow you to sabotage somebody. So I think those things. I think there's a lot of people who are really strong diplomatically. I think the meta is. I think the Imperium has a lot of growth potential. Let me just put it that way, in my opinion. So let's wrap it up by just going around and parting thoughts, things we might have missed, before we say goodbye to people who've been with us for an hour and 45 minutes. So anybody like to go first?
I guess I can.
Mhm.
So I've got like 2 big points I wanna, I guess, remind ourselves of. In POK, still, you have to answer the question of how am I going to win invasion combat? How am I getting my ground forces to the planets? And often the case, the answer is still blue tech. But if you can get away with giving a different, better, more creative answer, you're often supposed to. That's just the way to win the game most often, I think.
Cool.
That will depend on your race, of course, because that's the biggest, I don't know, decider of that, but you get the idea. And the second thing is that if you are playing a race that gets paid to fight, don't be afraid to go fight and get paid for it. As the Cabal, the Baronies, the Necros, the Mahawks, and even just the Argent Flight that can just get away with fighting because of how efficient they are, get those control objectives. Like, be diplomatic about it, but I would say POK is we burn bright and live short lives of 5 rounds. Go for it. Get those points as soon as you can.
Yeah, I like it. Stads, how about you?
I just want to say thanks for having me on. It's been fun. As for the strategic points, the main one is if you want to be winning as much POK as you can, I think you need to be asking yourself, even more than in base game, does this choice from me help me win the game? Is this tech really going to help me win the game? Or is it going to be fun? Is it gravy? Is building this plastic going to help me win the game? That sort of thing. You need to be critical of yourself. You need to be killing your darlings. It's hard.
What's killing your darlings? What's that
Killing
mean?
your darlings is an expression. You may love something, but if
Okay.
it's not giving you what you need to purge it. I think it comes from being a writer of a book or something, and you really like this plot point, but it doesn't fit into the rest of the book, and you gotta axe it, that sort of thing. You may like Neural. Drawing action cards is fun, but I don't think Neural usually helps you win the game, and I don't research it at all anymore.
Yeah, me neither.
And my last point is I am so excited for this SCP tournament. I'm sure we're all going to be wrong to at least some extent, probably to some large extents, and I can't wait to see how we're wrong and what we can learn.
Well, one of the ways we're probably going to be wrong, Stats, is that less experienced players, the game may not end as often in round 5, right? So people are going to be like, those guys are crazy. But I think that that's a product of people, of experience with POK partly.
Yeah.
Def, you wanted to respond to that as well.
Oh, I just wanted to say that yours truly will just win the tournament, but
Well, I hope so.
I hope to meet you in the finals then. Mantis,
Yeah.
you got some closing words?
How would you like to wrap up, Mantis?
I don't know if I have any closing words. I mean, we kind of discussed everything we were looking to discuss here.
How is it? How do you find the meta has been changing? Like your playtest, you played a lot of playtest games. What, probably like 30 or 40 just playtest games alone?
I don't know if I kept track. But I think that the one thing that changes from a meta point of view is it's definitely more aggressive. I know you keep referring to that as Euro meta, and maybe that's something that Euro players were doing in base game, but I'm starting to see that more in the NA games as well. It's just there's more control objectives. With things being a few around, you're less likely to see, hey, you score the control objective this round, I'll score it next round. If you're the one scoring it next round, you're probably shooting yourself in the foot.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you see more often than not, people are fighting over it because they want to be the one that scores it this round.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that's one of the things, like that's one of the key parts of all this dynamism. I think my parting thought is, strategically is that I'm assuming that all of this intensity and dynamism that we've talked about is going to lead to earlier and earlier, what I wouldn't call it win slaying, but blocking of other people from scoring. And this conversation brought out how that might be enhanced by the fact that a couple of people are lined up to win in round 5 when others aren't. And so what do we do about that in round 4? But I actually think people are going to get, as people get more and more comfortable in the meta being aggressive on TTS games in general, I think we'll see more and more round 1 and 2 point denial as well, which is, relatively less than normal, let's say, in the meta.
It's bloodthirsty is what it is, and I'm all for it.
So I want to thank each of you guys, and Luke, of course, for participating. On the bloodthirsty note, we'll wrap up. I want to thank Flat Tomatoes for being in the background here, recording today, doing the work to get this online for people to listen. We need to thank, like we've had in the other sessions, the people who make the community possible, like Phil and the Discord community, and Raptor in the new mod. Like everybody who worked on getting the new mod out so quickly and having it ready in December was amazing. Everybody's had lots of opportunity to play POK. I also want to thank Milty, not only for helping us with the graphic design for the covers of these strategy session episodes, but also his huge role that he played in getting the game refined in the playtesting period. And of course, Dane and everybody, all the playtesters and people who worked on getting this amazing expansion out. People who were skeptical like me, who thought, oh, bringing back leaders and Distant Suns from TI3 is like, why would we do that? Like, I was very wrong. It's so tight and so amazing. So, I really appreciate everybody's time and effort, and I'm really looking forward to that tournament as well, Stats, like you said. It's going to be a lot of fun. Watch us all just get kicked out in not even the preliminary round. What's it going to be called? Like the play-in or in the qualifiers. We're all going to lose.
I definitely will after that sentence.
All right. Any last words? Anything I'm forgetting? Should we say goodbye?
We're good. If a last word, if you have any comments, I'd hang out in most active TI4 Discord. So if you want to be like at stats, you were totally wrong about this, I would love to have that conversation with you. Or even if I was right about something.
Yeah, that's something we should say for sure, is that there's a lot of ongoing discussion, strategy discussion in the community, in the Discords, in Space Cats Peace Turtles Discord. Of course, we have to thank Hunter and Matt for being the inspiration for these kinds of discussions, and their Discord is lively with debates. And we're looking forward to hearing all their new episodes as well. So yes, we look forward to further strategic sessions. We'll do like another, this is the 301 session. We'll do like another 302 session sometime, maybe during or after the tournament or something like that, to see how the meta has been evolving and what we're all thinking and what some other people are thinking at that point. All right, so I think that's it. And thanks again. And we'll talk to you guys another time. Enjoy your POK.